would say that one of the top reasons that I see products fail today is going back to, again, some of the stories I've already shared, is building something that nobody wants or building something that just a few people want. And then the bigger question is, why does this happen? And that is that when an entrepreneur sees an opportunity, we quickly gravitate towards a solution. We might say, okay, there's a problem in the market, let's go build this thing. And we spend every waking hour trying to bring the solution to life. Most first solutions are not going to work. And I'm not saying this statistically. You can look at lots of even startups and products. It takes usually 2 or 3 iterations and sometimes drastic pivots to make the thing really work. So most first solutions don't work. And if you spend a lot of time building that, that's where we lose time. We get late to market. We may, run out of resources and kind of give up. So those are all the symptoms and kind of lead to those things failing. So what we do today is we tell people that the world has changed. Today, it's cheaper and faster to build products. That's not the risky part. The risky part is really uncovering the right customer problems to go after. And so we kind of flip this. And one of the mantras that we teach is basically love the problem, not your solution. Mm-hmm. So if you can identify a customer segment, immerse yourself in their world and prioritize just 1 or 2 problems worth solving, and we'll get some evidence that these are truly worth solving and there are techniques for doing this, you put yourself in a much better place to then find solutions that could potentially get their attention, could at least get your foot in the door. And from there, you evolve into something much, much bigger. Thousands of startups and products through, we actually break the milestones into 3 stages. So before product market fit, we talk about problem solution fit. And this is where the objective there is going and convincing yourself that you have a problem worth solving. So you've got the customer segment, the niche customer segment identified. You can identify a clear problem they're willing to spend money on, and you can go and demo them something where you can even oftentimes get advance payment. So that's what we call problem solution fit. And that, irrespective of product domain, we find 3 months to be enough time to go through that cycle once. So after that, you will know with evidence whether there is something here or not. And to me, that's the first step. So I had spent 9 months in my previous endeavors, building something and then trying to sell it. Now we try to sell before we build. So that's kind of the 3-month cycle. If you can do that, you're in a much stronger foundation because you're actually getting customers. The customers are there. You now have to build this thing. So you have to make sure, of course, you can build it. Feasibility is possible. So there are some checks that you have to put in place. But from that point on, from that 3-month point, we find that on average, teams take about 24 months. So about 2 years is the magic moment. And again, irrespective of whether it's a hardware or a software product, 22 years is about the average time that people take to hit product market fit. Now, some products could be, it's an average, or some could be a bit longer, some could be a bit shorter. But that tends to be kind of around, to answer your question, kind of the average time frame we've seen. So I guess the first thing is I always like to start with a bit of my background. So I've never really lived in a home country. If I say that, I've always been an expat. So I grew up in Nigeria. My parents are from India originally. And so we didn't have a lot of extended family, but we had lots of friends. So I grew up in a very kind of social environment. So dinner tables were always, dinner with immediate family, or we had a lot of social gatherings even in the middle of the week. So we'd have dinners with other folks.
Very cool, very cool. And so when you were growing up, did you have any type of companies, or not companies, but projects that you started to start your entrepreneurial journey off? Were you selling anything at school or anything like that?
Yeah. So I think I got more interested in entrepreneurship when I was kind of late in my high school, maybe getting into university. Before that, again, just a bit stereotypical, but being born to Indian parents, you were very academic. So to me, it was very much about kind of school and get good grades. And that's kind of the education I had growing up. But it was always interested. I think one of the things I learned fairly quickly in school that I could learn how to learn. And so kind of used that to, in some ways, hack my tests, and so I was getting good grades, and so I had a lot of free time, and so I got very excited about kind of business. One of the things I got into was reading a lot of business books. Even though I was an engineering student, was reading a lot of that. So that's maybe how I got intrigued or interested. And then again, hearing stories of famous entrepreneurs of the time and what they were doing, I was always fascinated with building something. And I call it the artist phase of entrepreneurship. It's like building something cool, making a dent in the universe. All those things were very aspirationally exciting for me back then.
Mm-hmm. What types? Who are you following? What types of people were you reading back then? Who are some of your
So again, being more a technologist, I kind of got to see folks like Bill Gates back then. Early days of Microsoft, and then even Steve Jobs, kind of early days of that. These are like in the 80s. And so just seeing all of that, I had a personal computer of my own, kind of very early. So it was all that was very exciting to me. And it was like one day, it'll be cool to grow up and do things like that.
Mm-hmm. And so you do have a software background. So you were a programmer that's for a number of different companies. Did you ever tinker around with different ideas when you were working at any of these other companies? Did something kind of click and you started exploring, these different options that having a programming background could have afforded you?
So the first thing I would say is that I didn't actually go to school for programming. I kind of taught myself that.
Oh, wow.
And it was actually part of that tinkering, curiosity that got me. So I was going to school for a very pure engineering. I was electrical engineering, and I was working as an intern in this power company, and I was really bored out of my mind because I've always been more of an abstract thinker. And my boss kind of put me on this little project, like a small programming scripting project. And that's where I said, sure, I'll do it. And I learned enough to get it done. And he saw that I got, really excited by that. So he sent me down to the basement to go work with this other person who was working on some software. And that was my first real, project, I would say, where I got to do that. And I loved it. So when I went back to school, I did look up some classes, went online and just started tinkering and building a lot of stuff. And that's where, like, maybe on the side, even while I was in university, there was a lot of tinkering, made friends with computer science students and just started sharing ideas and just working on projects back then.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. And so what was the first time when you started to step out on your own and do your own types of projects?
Yeah, so I was keen even in university, and I even started asking. So again, I was an international student, so didn't really have citizenship back then. And so for me, it was important to understand how to go about like legally forming a company. I was all for doing a startup, and some of the advice I got from folks back then is you got to wait, you've got to get just some immigration stuff in order. And so I did the next best thing is I used a number of kind of internship opportunities. The university I was in had that as a requirement. So you had to do this to graduate. So I used that as an opportunity to work in this time more, software oriented things, got some training there. And then as soon as I graduated, I joined a startup as quickly as I could. So I didn't kind of venture out on my own, but I did the next best thing, which is let's go and join a startup. Mm-hmm. And that in hindsight was probably a great experience. And I advise a lot of people who are, exploring to do that because you get to see just how uncertain and chaotic that environment can be. And then you also learn in some ways on other people's dime. So the founders of the company were really the ones taking a lot of that, the brunt of the risk. And certainly the project that I started with them, the first one failed, the second one almost failed, and then we got bought. So there was a happy ending at the end, but just that whole cycle I was able to witness that as a student kind of learner versus being in the business.
Mm-hmm. And did the first, I guess the first one that failed, was that because you didn't have a product market fit? Was that kind of some of the catalyst that made you launch into the areas that you did launch into, do you feel?
Yeah, so it was. I would say there was absolutely there was some of that. I would so the reason I got recruited in the first place is I got involved in some early, this is kind of telecommunications. And when we were porting numbers, local number portability, keeping your phone number, I got involved in an early project right out of school in one of my internships where I kind of became a resident expert on how to do that. So this startup recruited me for that purpose. And so they had kind of all the right intent, which is, let's capitalize on this big thing happening in the telecom industry. Everyone needs to port numbers. Let's build a product and a system. But looking at it back from now, it was very much of a standard playbook of let's spend a year, 2 years kind of building this product and then take it to market and sell it. And yes, along the way, we built what was per spec, but other competitors came in and built better products than we did. So we could not get product market fit.
Interesting. So talk about some of your first experiences. So let's see. So you founded Wired Reach, correct?
Yeah.
What was the target market for Wired Reach? What types of industries or customers were you serving with it?
Yeah, so it was inspired by a triggering event, not unlike the one we're going through, although it's the one we're going through now. The pandemic crisis is a much bigger global kind of thing that's happening. But when I started my company was right after 9/11. And part of the thing that happened there, a number of things. One, lots of companies even the company that bought us, gave us a choice. We could either all relocate to headquarters, which was in Boston. I was in Dallas at the time, or kind of take a package and leave. And so I chose to take the package because I was just not in a position to relocate. So all that was happening. But what I saw was a lot of the folks that I knew, all my friends had all been displaced, were kind of all moving. And so the idea of building a social network before it was even called that just popped in my head one day. It's like the idea spark. And I watched the movie 6 Degrees of Separation. I know that Will Smith. And so that was where it was just fascinating, how connected are we? And I came from a networking, telecom background. So it's like, I can build something to connect people up. And that was the spark of the idea. So that was really how I got started. And I shared this. And so again, this is back, the artist phase of I need to build something cool and amazing. And we can't tell anyone because then the idea will get stolen. Mm-hmm. So I share this with my fiance, who became my, eventually was my wife. But kind of shared it with her, shared it with some very close friends, and they all thought it was a great idea, and they're like, that would be amazing, so go do it. And so I took a lot of the savings and stocks that I had received from the previous exit, invested that into this company, recruited some folks, and we spent 9 months kind of building something. So our audience was to be determined. It was really everyone that could possibly want to connect with everyone else, which again, in hindsight, that's just too broad of a segment, but those are all things I didn't know at the time.
And you mentioned sharing of ideas. Do you have a different perspective on that today? If you have an idea, is it still very closely guarded to the chest at first, or do you feel that it's a little bit better to talk about things?
So absolutely. So ideas are best when they're shared because we want ideas to spread. The mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs, innovators make is they think the idea is the secret sauce, is the solution, is how they do something. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that you need to share ideas with customers, and customers at the end of the day want to eat the sausage. They don't care how the sausage is made, right? So they don't really care about the algorithms and the secret sauce behind it. They just want the result or the outcome. And that part can be shared and should be shared very early on, because for most ideas, the challenge is getting attention. If I come to you and say, I can do this, and you say, so what? And don't bat an eye, then I haven't gotten your attention. And no matter what I do, I'll never get you to buy my product. So the first battle really is, how do we share an idea so that we can get one's attention? And that requires a different kind of sharing. So we share maybe the value proposition or what's different about the idea. We might talk about a problem that a customer is struggling with. Those would be interesting. So even going back to the social network, Facebook nailed this. They were not the first social network, but they went on a college campus and said, most of you students want to talk to each other. You're stuck in class. We can give you a platform where you can do this. You can gossip. You can put stuff online. And it just took off, right? So it was more about what people want to do versus the idea, the solution piece of it itself.
Got it. Got it. So around 2010 or so, you started Leanstack. What was the catalyst for Leanstack?
Yeah, so maybe just since we've been going with the timeline, so Wired Reach was around 2003, 2004. And so there was about a 6 or 7 kind of year period before Leanstack. So Wired Reach kind of went on. And I went through different phases of evolution in my thinking. So in the beginning, it was a lot about the artist mode. Let's just build something amazing. And I spent a year and a half doing that and realized that, again, we were not essentially hitting the market right, and we were building things that weren't working. But then realize that even as an artist, you have to be able to sell your art, otherwise you starve, and your ideas don't go any further. So I took what I had and I began to evolve it into smaller niches. And so we took this big social networking idea and turned it into a collaboration app. We got graphic designers and folks. So it was kind of more narrowed focus, kind of a niche focus, but we got some headway and some runway that way. But even then, I had launched maybe 3 products along the way, and one of them really took off, the other 2 didn't. And I was, being this introspective engineer, always interested in cracking the code or cracking the process. Like, what's different? Every idea starts out amazing, but what makes it amazing at the end? How do you get there? So around 2009, 2010, this is where folks like Eric Ries and Steve Blank, some of your listeners might have heard those names, who the author of the Lean Startup, started sharing some of his ideas and his lessons learned. It sounded very similar in stories, which is, we had this great, amazing idea, but we didn't build an amazing product in the first shot. It took many iterations. So that was what was happening around 2009, 2010, kind of digging deeper into what could be a repeatable process for launching products. And that eventually sparked into what became kind of Leanstack. So it was more of a introspective look at the process of launching products and then trying to codify something that was more repeatable and systematic than what I'd been doing, which is just really throwing a bunch of stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now, did Leanstack come first before your books, or did you publish the books or after Leanstack?
Yeah, so it's and this is what we also see a lot happening today, is that a lot of projects start off as side projects. A lot of companies start off as side projects. So the true evolution of Leanstack really came from a blog that I started writing while I was running Wired Reach. So I was running Wired Reach, and I began blogging about some of these lessons learned and my experiences and learnings. That turned into a small audience. The Lean startup movement started to pick up. And I started spending more time, speaking and going into conferences. Along the way, some readers suggested to me that I take some of my posts and write a book. And after some convincing and thinking of my own, I said, sure, I'll do that. And it's in that process that other tools got developed. So one of the tools I built was Lean Canvas, which is a one-page business planning or business modeling tool. And that took off. And so I saw all of a sudden a lot of traction in my side project than my core business. My core business was running just fine, but there was a lot of excitement here. And that was so for me, that was kind of looking at both sides. And even my advisors would tell me that it looks like you're very passionate about this stuff, the kind of this business modeling stuff. Maybe you should consider doing that and sell your core business. And so it was a journey that I had to go through, but it was about maybe 6-9 months later, I sold off Wired Reach and then went off and did Leanstack. So technically Leanstack was founded after the book got published, after even Lean Canvas got built. But if I look at it from the origin story, it was really all in this blogging and kind of side project of learning that was the inception of Leanstack.
And your books have obviously done very, very well. Can you talk about some of the techniques that you talk about in your books, especially around maybe helping a new business or someone who's thinking about getting into their own business, especially
Yeah.
because of the time that we're in? What types of advice would you give someone who's thinking about doing that
Yeah.
on their
So
own?
I would say that one of the top reasons that I see products fail today is going back to, again, some of the stories I've already shared, is building something that nobody wants or building something that just a few people want. And then the bigger question is, why does this happen? And that is that when an entrepreneur sees an opportunity, we quickly gravitate towards a solution. We might say, okay, there's a problem in the market, let's go build this thing. And we spend every waking hour trying to bring the solution to life. Most first solutions are not going to work. And I'm not saying this statistically. You can look at lots of even startups and products. It takes usually 2 or 3 iterations and sometimes drastic pivots to make the thing really work. So most first solutions don't work. And if you spend a lot of time building that, that's where we lose time. We get late to market. We may run out of resources and kind of give up. So those are all the symptoms and kind of lead to those things failing. So what we do today is we tell people that the world has changed. Today, it's cheaper and faster to build products. That's not the risky part. The risky part is really uncovering the right customer problems to go after. And so we kind of flip this. And one of the mantras that we teach is basically love the problem, not your solution.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can identify a customer segment, immerse yourself in their world and prioritize just 1 or 2 problems worth solving, and we'll get some evidence that these are truly worth solving and there are techniques for doing this, you put yourself in a much better place to then find solutions that could potentially get their attention, could at least get your foot in the door, and from there you evolve into something much, much bigger. So that's kind of a nutshell of what we teach, and the 2 books are really a bunch of tactics and techniques and tools for getting you through that discovery process and essentially building something that customers essentially want.
Mm-hmm. And I would assume that based on your previous history, that you probably would suggest niching it down to specific types of users as well, rather than saying we've got this great thing for anybody to use.
Absolutely. So when you try to market to everyone, you sell to no one. And your message gets so watered down that people might even say, oh, great idea, but they're just politely lying to you. It's like, go do your thing, but it's not for me, it's for everyone else, but everyone else is no one. So absolutely. And so there's a big emphasis kind of niching down, but we even use the term early adopter. An early adopter is someone who is as visionary as the entrepreneur because they understand the problem, they want a solution. They don't know what the solution might be, but they want it. And a good indicator of an early adopter is someone who has been triggered. So someone who has been triggered to look for a solution. So now we also teach triggering events. So I mentioned the triggering event with 9/11. Today we're going through this pandemic crisis. A lot of old solutions have broken. We are here using video conferencing. A lot of people are being forced to go remote and virtual because face-to-face meetings aren't happening. So that creates opportunity. So that's, again, an example of a triggering event where now all of a sudden the status quo is no longer an option. So we need to look for a new way to do things. And that's where entrepreneurship really shines. Mm-hmm. So that's how you find early adopters. That's how you find these niches. It doesn't have to be a big triggering event like the pandemic. It could just be regulation change. We had in Europe GDPR come through last year, and lots of businesses had to comply and do all these things. That's an example of things. When people have their first child in the house, when they become parents, that's an example of a triggering event. All of a sudden, what used to work with no children in the house will no longer work when you have a baby, and so it creates lots of opportunity for selling or for creating problem solutions for that environment.
Mm-hmm. And do your methods and the techniques that you teach work for pretty well any types of products? Obviously, you have a technology background. Would it work for a physical product, or maybe even some type of a service type company? Does it work for pretty well anyone?
Yeah, so I was skeptical. So in the very beginning, when I was first writing, I actually even had a disclaimer saying this. I'm a technologist. I've tested this on my products, and so use at your own risk. but I got invited. And one of the things that I learned is that people would invite me in, and I was giving talks in even sometimes real estate audiences, but biotech and sciences. And I was very nervous doing those because I, again, knew that I was coming from this digital background. But what I began to learn over the course of several months and even years is that what we were really teaching was a meta language. All businesses have customers have problems, we have to build solutions, we have to market and talk about value propositions. And those are the tools that I was essentially using and teaching. And so over the years, we began to broaden, at Leanstack, we began to broaden the kinds of customers we worked with. And fast forward to today, we have worked with a very wide array of folks that are doing services businesses, low tech, high tech, restaurant, doesn't matter. So it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, if you have customers and problems and there's competition, you can apply the same techniques. The principles are the same. The tactics will oftentimes be different. So trying to build a hardware-based company where cycle times are longer will require some different tactics than maybe doing a B2C company like a Facebook. So some tactics will be different, but the principles tend to stay more or less the same.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any insight into the average amount of time to, I believe that you really focus in on product market fit. Do you have any insights into, I'm going to do a physical product company and I should expect to have product market fit by this time, and if it's a service-based company, it should be about this time. Are there any general rules of thumb that you've learned?
Yeah, so through running by this point, thousands of startups and products through, we actually break the milestones into 3 stages. So we have, before product market fit, we talk about problem solution fit, and this is where the objective there is going and convincing yourself that you have a problem worth solving. So you've got the customer segment, the niche customer segment identified. You can identify a clear problem they're willing to spend money on, and you can go and demo them something where you can even oftentimes get advance payment. So that's what we call problem solution fit. And that, irrespective of product domain, we find 3 months to be enough time to go through that cycle once. So after that, you will know with evidence whether there is something here or not. And to me, that's the first step. So I had spent 9 months in my previous endeavors, building something and then trying to sell it. Now we try to sell before we build. So that's kind of the 3-month cycle. If you can do that, you're in a much stronger foundation because you're actually getting customers. The customers are there. You now have to build this thing. So you have to make sure, of course, you can build it. Feasibility is possible. So there are some checks that you have to put in place. But from that point on, from that 3-month point, we find that on average, teams take about 24 months. So about 2 years is the magic moment. And again, irrespective of whether it's a hardware or a software product, 2 years is about the average time that people take to hit product market fit. Now, some products could be, it's an average, or some could be a bit longer, some could be a bit shorter. But that tends to be kind of around, to answer your question, kind of the average time frame we've seen.
Interesting. Okay. And I guess define what you would say is product market fit. 2 years down the road, we've achieved this product market fit. Does that, obviously that means that we have identified the specific user. Is there an income benchmark that, kind of justifies that, or just, I guess, talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So if you break the 3 stages, I didn't mention the last stage. So the first stage is that problem solution fit, which is before jumping all in. So, do we have a problem worth solving, a customer, a market worth going after? Some of that requires, doing some internal baselining of what does success look like. So that's an important first step, is that it's sometimes I find people just jump into an idea which looks promising, and then 6 months later they find it's too small a market for their ambition. Or they'll never get investors because investors don't want to fund these small ideas. So right from the start, we encourage people in their business modeling exercise to think of a minimum success criteria. So that helps them figure out what size of a problem, will satisfy their ambition. So that's kind of the pre-work. Then product market fit is that march towards showing that you can build something, showing that you can reach repeatability in the business. And repeatability requires you to pass through break even, start to see signs of profitability even. So you're kind of proving out that there is this repeatable customer segment, there's this problem, our solution is working. we now are ready to scale. And scale is that third stage. So product market fit to me is when you reach the point where you prove out the business model working in some small scale. And the only thing left to do is now, pour the accelerant with the rocket fuel. For some, that will be raising a big round of funding and then starting to invest in growth. And growth requires investment because the payoff times are oftentimes, not immediate. So you need investment to carry you through that growth cycle. So to me, that's what product market fit looks like. And if we work with teams that are bootstrapping, at that point, they choose profitability over growth. So they might then kind of hunker down and try to improve their marketing, improve their channels, try to raise prices or experiment with pricing, find the optimal price point. So those are kind of the forks in the road. So it's either pursuing growth or profit, but product market fit is proving out the business model in some small scale. Maybe to illustrate that real quick, I used Facebook just a little bit early on, but the early days of Facebook on one college campus, Harvard, could have been problem solution fit. It's like we stumbled into something, but it's not yet repeatable. But going to the next 4 or 5 campuses, which they did, proved out product market fit. And they did it very, very fast. So that was not 2 years. This was like in the span of 9 months, say. They could then go to their investors and paint a very big scale story because they had cracked the engine for how to bring students and get them highly engaged on the platform. They could show the business model working with advertisers. And so they hit product market fit very quickly. It was not 2 years, it was more like 6 to 9 months. And they could raise a big round of funding and then just pour that all into rolling out the same thing. And of course, you're still improving product, but it's mostly focused on scaling than it is on getting the product, right or better.
That makes sense. So Ash, what would you say is next for you? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to right now?
Yeah, so our mission in Leanstack, and that's one of the reasons why I went in it all in, is again starting to see how entrepreneurship had changed, starting to see that it was popping up in many places. Our mission is to take a lot of this body of knowledge that we have kind of learned and collected ourselves, and really teach it to others. And so Leanstack is essentially a platform that allows entrepreneurs to come in and either self-educate or find accelerators, find coaches, and use a lot of our tools to kind of accelerate their journey. So kind of our challenges today is really scaling that. We feel like we have hit product market fit with some of the tools that we have, but as with any of these 3 stages, it's never easy. There's always going to be challenges. So we're kind of entering that post product market fit stage, which is a lot of partnerships, a lot of scaling. We're working with accelerators and corporates and universities, training and doing those kinds of things. So it's never a straight road, but it's definitely a fun journey to be on.
That's awesome. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to either get in touch with you or even learn a little bit more about Leanstack?
Yeah, so leanstack.com is probably where I would just direct folks. That's where a lot of our content is, and there's you can sign up for free, and a lot of our initial playbooks, which is what we call them for how to get started, are all 100% free, so you can check them out. And there are some different mindsets, so it's not for everyone. But if some of this kind of backwards thinking is like I like to call it counterintuitive thinking, appeals to you, then check it out, and if it helps, then you can always kind of go deeper. My email is just ash@leanstack.com, so I'm very easy to find. And also I'm fairly active on Twitter and places like Instagram, and it's just my name, Ash Maurya, so easy to find there too, or LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Well, this is fantastic. I appreciate the time, and I hope to hear more from you in the future. I'm sure there's plenty more that you guys can offer our listeners. Maybe dive a little bit deeper into some of the techniques and that you guys use. Perhaps we can do another episode of diving in a little bit deeper. So
yeah, absolutely, would love to. Thanks for the opportunity, Matt.
Excellent. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.